I am Jennifer lL.W. Fink. I am a writer. I am a mom of 4 sons, and those two things have combined frequently throughout my career. I have a website, buildingboys.net, that also birthed a podcast on boys. I have a Substack newsletter, Building Boys Bulletin. I recently published my book, Building Boys, Raising Great Guys in a World That Misunderstands Males.
I love that. Congratulations. So you have 4 sons.
I do.
When did you start to be like, oh, I want to be a spokesperson?
Oh gosh, it wasn't, oh, I want to be a spokesperson. It was, what is going on here? I don't understand. I could not understand how they could apparently randomly, from what I could see, go from like sitting contentedly peaceful, doing whatever they were doing, whether that was playing with toys or looking at a book or watching TV, and then with nothing exterior happening that I could tell, just randomly get up and start chasing each other around the house, jumping on the couch. I didn't understand that. Didn't make sense to me. My husband at the time, he reassured me, yeah, that's normal. I'm like, really? And so I started looking for information really to survive my own life, to better equip me to parent the children I had. And the further I got into that, the more I started realizing, especially once my oldest son entered school, that a lot of the issues that we were having in our home and encountering in school and in society, so were all these other families of boys. I'm not saying that we don't do anything wrong, and I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with our kid. What I am saying is that when you realize that these are common issues that are happening with a lot of boys and a lot of families of boys, it seemed there was more going on. And so that's when I started the blog and I started writing more and trying to share these things because I want to empower families of boys to understand what's happening. There's a couple different levels of misunderstanding boys that I've noticed. A first one is that there is misunderstanding regarding boys' development. I didn't know until I really started digging into this that males and females have a different timeline of neurological, physical, cognitive development. I didn't know that. I did not know that at birth, male babies are generally less physically and neurologically mature than female babies, which is part of why, if you dig into statistics, male babies are more likely to have health issues. That biological precarity persists as children mature. Girls, for instance, their fine motor skills and their neurological skills tend to be more advanced than your average boys at age 5 and 6. And I think this is part of why girls are more biologically, neurologically ready to sit and read and write at 5 and 6 than boys are. It doesn't mean boys aren't going to get there. It means that it will likely be easier for them when they are 8 than when they are 5. So I think that's the first primary one. Okay. And then you can layer on top of that, I think that there is a tendency amongst many of us, unconscious, absolutely unconscious and not intended to cause harm, but there are a lot of people who their initial stance interacting with boys is they sort of assume there's going to be a problem here.
Yes.
And that gets in the way of developing relationships with them, and that creates a lot of downstream problems. And so it's not just what I am doing or just what my kids are doing. I have to look at the bigger picture as well. And that can sound on its surface like I'm taking away responsibility for myself or for my children. But for me, it was helpful because I recognize that all of this is happening within situations and within context in society. And it's helpful to consider those things. So for instance, right, if my kid is not doing something I want him to do, insert anything here. It could be not showering, could be not doing his homework. It could be any of these million things.
Yeah.
If I just exclusively focus on he's not doing what I want him to do, that can, first of all, for a lot of parents, it feels like disrespect, which triggers something in a lot of us, especially those of us who are female, and it triggers the whole like male disrespecting me, and we react based on previous things. So by realizing that all of this is in context, I'm able to look more at and realize there's other factors going in and not overly focus on whatever the thing is. Does that
Oh,
make
that's so
sense?
interesting. I mean, from what I understand, good therapists will help even couples understand that. They think the fight is about the dishwasher, or they think
Yes.
the fight is about this kind of like very specific thing, but that it usually comes down to power, feeling valued, all these other core things. So were you able to understand when you were triggered, like your own feelings, like you just said about the being disrespected by a man?
It's absolutely been a process for me. And I will very freely admit, talking to you right now, it's a lot easier to say, yes, I recognize that now. And I will likely get caught in that circumstance. It could be later today, it could be next week. I'm not perfect at this yet.
Yes.
There were so many of us. And for me, the way we were parented, that's just in here subconsciously.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I did realize that this feeling of being disrespected really would trigger something in me. And
Yes.
I needed to deal with that because honestly, a lot of times it's not any sort of intentional disrespect. It can be as simple as they were focused on something else and truly forgot about it.
Right. Right. And I just think in general, parenting is filled with landmines. Every relationship is, in terms of what our triggers are. And the better we know ourselves and the better we know our traumas, the more we can breathe and take care of ourselves and then be there for our kids. So going back to you and your kind of understanding your own triggers and the bigger context, was there something that you did practically, like almost an advice for someone kind of going through this, that helped you maybe take it less personally or figure out how to move through some of these power dynamics or triggers?
For me, it's really been a process and a long process. And what I mean by that is a process of handling something, feeling kind of bad about it later, realizing you wished you'd done things differently, thinking about it, maybe getting to interview a couple more experts just in the course of work and life beyond that, and just trying again and again. And I think my kids would actually agree with this too. I think I am a better parent today than I was 15 years ago, than I was 10 years ago, because I didn't know what I didn't know about parenting, about myself, about the world. So there was no magic switch for me. It was really just day in and day out of putting in the work, seeing what worked, seeing what didn't work, and trying to do better each day. One of the things that I hope that this book does for parents is when you have a better understanding of a typical developmental timeline of an average male. Again, there are great variations within this.
Yes.
I'm talking average and I'm talking typical, and respect whatever variations are in your life and in your world. But when you understand what that average timeline might look like, you're less likely to get frustrated at your 5-year-old for not writing his name because you realize this is a little bit developmentally beyond him right now. And maybe if I don't make a big deal out of it and we just try again in 6 months, it might go better. Same thing when you understand the developmental, where like a 10, 11, 12-year-old boy is completely normal, natural, and expected for them to be disorganized, for them to be going more towards their friends than towards you right then. And for you perhaps to feel a little left out and a little alone. If you understand that, you're less likely to get upset about it and to jump all over him for something that it's just a growth process.
Right.
Doesn't mean you can't talk about things like organization and help him develop strategies. It just means that you're not going to focus on the thing that much. And that's what I was kind of trying to say before.
Right. That you're not going to be overly focused, right, on the particular fight or the particular skill that's not learned,
Yes.
and just more kind of understanding them in a bigger context. And that
Yes.
helps you have more compassion. So along those lines, how would you, like, what advice you would give to parents? So let's say I'm someone who's like, you know what, I don't care if my kid writes their name. I just don't care.
Mm-hmm.
I care so much more about them being comfortable in their skin. There's no pressure from me. Fine. But let's say the teachers put that pressure on the kid, or other kids put the pressure on that
Yep.
kid. How do you recommend advocating for your child to take away some of that pressure?
What I say to parents is make your home kind of the safe space for your kid, right? I can't change the external world's expectations. I cannot control everything out there. My youngest son, for instance, he got in trouble a lot for basically being a moving, active kid who liked to have fun. And that doesn't go over well in elementary school or, frankly, in middle school. And he was one of those kids. He's really smart, and he sometimes would know exactly where the line was, and that if he did this, he'd get in trouble. And he would like do the calculation and go, yeah, it's still worth it to me. And he would do it anyway. Right. So we have the talk about the expectations about school and all of those things. But the fact of the matter is he was a kid who he needed to move to learn. He needed to use his body. He needed opportunities to tinker with things and figure them out and to be self-directed. And I couldn't make that happen in school. So one of the things I did was at home, I gave him plenty of space to do those things. And I didn't stress out too much about the school stuff. I let the school stuff happen at school. Does that make sense?
It does. So instead of trying to talk to the teacher and advocating for, a special bouncy seat for him, or.
Well, I didn't say don't talk to the teacher at all.
Okay.
I said step one.
Okay.
So step one is facilitate your kids' interest and styles of learning whenever possible at home. Accommodate the kid you have, because let's face it, we all have our unique tendencies and gifts, and we tend to thrive when given an opportunity to use those. It is absolutely worth having conversations with your son's teacher, the school. Your mileage may vary greatly. Every parent who is watching or listening to that knows this. Some teachers will be super responsive and like, yes, we can get him a bouncy seat. We can whatever. Other teachers won't.
Right.
Sometimes you have the choice of switching to another teacher, of going and talking to the principal. Sometimes you don't have that choice.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't have that choice. So it is absolutely worth having those conversations and frame them in a respectful, helpful manner. We all know that teachers are tremendously overworked. They are dealing with all kinds of kids, all kinds of needs, and expectations piled on from everywhere with not enough time, money, or resources to really do any of that as well as they would like. Share it informationally. Here's what I've noticed about my kid. He tends to do better if, and share some ideas. Hopefully you will see some success there. If you don't, you may need to just really focus on the things that you can control again, because I can't shape the whole world, unfortunately, to love and accept my child in the same way I do. I live in a small rural town, so I get not having choices. There is one elementary school. I mean, there's one public elementary school, there's a tiny Catholic school, and a tiny Lutheran school. Those are your choices. And in the time my kids were in school, I had numerous conversations with numerous teachers and administrators over the year, just about recess, for instance. Right. So my active one who was getting in trouble for things, like he would get recess taken away as a punishment.
Oh,
there is lots of research talking about why recess is good for kids academically, emotionally, socially, and lots of research on why you shouldn't take it away as a punishment. And I shared that, and I had those conversations, and I was not successful in changing that. Our particular school district, when the kids get to be in, I forget whatever grade, they don't get recess at all anymore. Well, guess what? My second son, he and his friends were consistently getting in trouble at lunch then, because they had no chance to move.
Right.
Just let them eat and go outside and shoot some hoops, and they'll probably not make trouble. And so I worked at this issue through a couple meetings, through a couple years. I did not have the power to change that on my own. I recommend that parents work together if possible. There are lots of possibilities there. I include some resources. Actually, my most recent Building Boys Bulletin, I believe, had some resources for that.
Oh, could you tell us, for people who want those resources, how they would join your bulletin? I know you have
Sure.
the Facebook group, but I would love for people to have access to all your resources.
First place to look is buildingboys.net. That is my website. It's in the process of being updated.
Oh, good.
When it is, it will be much easier to find all this information. But through there, you should be able to sign up for the newsletter, which is Building Boys Bulletin. Otherwise, just Google that and you'll be able to find it through there. And the Facebook group will be linked through there as well. And anybody that has a hard time finding it, I am more than happy to send you an email with personal links to help you get connected.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And what about the podcast? Are you
The
still
podcast?
actively doing it?
Oh gosh, yes.
Okay. And how many episodes do you have?
We are in our 6th year of recording on Boys Podcast, and we do an episode every Thursday and have done one every Thursday, for 5+ years now. So I don't know what that adds up to, but it's a lot.
It's a lot. That's
It's
amazing.
It's a lot.
That's amazing. Okay. So I feel like if I were to recap, the kind of essence of what you're saying is the importance of really creating an environment that's accepting and loving and safe for your boys to flail, to move, to mess around, and to not have the expectation to fit into some societal box.
To be who they are. And for some boys, that will be running around and Nerf basketball hoops and maybe not jumping off of furniture, but jumping off of something.
Yeah.
And for some boys, that will be the freedom to sing, to dance, to perform, to wear the things that sometimes they get scorned for when they go out in public wearing it.
Yeah.
Whatever you can do to make home a place where they can be their real, true, and authentic selves, I really think that helps counter all the other things that we can't change. One of the things I've learned through talking to a lot of parents and a lot of the experts on the podcast, I think moms need to understand that sometimes dad's reactions to things that they think like is not okay for a boy. And that can range because we all have our definitions of what's okay for a boy. A lot of dad's reactions are really based in a desire to keep their son safe. And at heart, they think that they are perhaps doing a kindness to this child because if I nip this in the bud, to use a terminology that a lot of people use, if I nip this in the bud, if I say, no, you can't go out looking like that, or no, you can't do this, I spare this child humiliation or teasing or pain in the larger world. And that can be very tricky to navigate as adults. It takes a lot of conversation. It takes a lot of patience. I think it helps if we can approach some of that from a point of not assuming the worst, that this person is not trying to harm this child. This person may be coming from a place of compassion, even if they can't fully express that.
I love that. And again, it goes back to what you were saying about how you may think that the fight is about why aren't you doing your laundry or why didn't you clear the table? But it's about this other thing. And to your point here, that you might think it's about, oh, well, he doesn't think our son should wear a pink shirt and fuck him, versus, wait a second, what's beneath that, right? Let me just go to what's beneath it and let's find our commonality.
Now, it's a lot easier for me and you to have this conversation, trying to navigate that whether you are married or not married.
Right, totally doesn't matter, right?
It is really, really tough, and you're not necessarily going to come to agreement.
Right.
Kids can thrive even when parents disagree. odds are you're not going to disagree about everything.
Right.
It's ideal if you can work through this stuff together. It doesn't always happen, and kids can still be okay.
I love that too. That's a really important message because there are lots of divorces and there are lots of conflicts.
As a divorced
yes,
parent, I've been divorced since 2010 now. I get very frustrated with people who tell you how to co-parent and how important it is to work on things together, because that is not the reality for a lot of people
yeah,
who are separated or parenting separately. A lot of times there was reasons for that. A lot of times there's still lingering stuff. There's reasons why we don't communicate well. We don't problem solve well.
yeah,
Do what you can do in
right.
what you can control.
Right. I just love that you're coming from such a compassionate place, like a compassionate place for you as an imperfect person, like you saying like, I'm in process and I'm a better parent now than I was, and I'm sure I'll be a better parent in 10 years. So that's beautiful. And also recognizing some parents are going to be able to be effective with their schools and some aren't. Some people are going to co-parent well and some aren't going to be able to do that, and to ultimately try to get to the heart of love, right, for
Yes.
your sons.
That's really the only thing that you can have the most control over, right? Is your interactions with your son. The first chapter of the book I wrote when I was still at the proposal stage for the
Yeah.
book, I think it's chapter 5 now. Help them find and develop their talents,
Yes.
because it's so crucial to help a child see who they are, find their sparks and nourish those sparks, because ultimately that, I believe, is where true confidence comes from.
Yes.
And in a world where not everybody sees and appreciates the gifts that are in our boys, where a lot of people see a potential problem, where people see a little boy having a hard time sitting still as a disciplinary issue, and instead of a kid who may not be developmentally ready, to have somebody looking at you and feeding your interest and your talents is so powerful, because it helps that child feel good about themselves. And when a child develops their skills and a sense of competence, like I can do, and it doesn't matter what it is, for a 4-year-old, no, maybe for a 2-year-old, it's putting on their pants maybe by
Right.
themselves. For a 6-year-old, riding a bike, it changes as they grow, but through being able to do something,
Yes.
that's where they develop that authentic confidence, and that allows them to discover what their capabilities are. And so for me, that's really where a lot of my parenting started. It's looking at your kid and kind of following his sparks and his interest and his delight.
And what I love about that is that that helps with the developing intrinsic motivation, because
Yes.
the parent isn't projecting something onto the kid. The
Yes.
parent isn't using the kid as some narcissistic supply to feed their ego because now their kid's doing something cool, so that makes them special. It really is looking at a child as a whole being.
One of the things I think it helps if we as parents remind ourselves that an interest in anything can lead anywhere, and you can learn so many skills in so many different ways. So my youngest, from a very early age, he was mechanically minded. He liked to tinker with things and do things. I valued I called it garage time. I valued his garage time as much as, if not more, than him getting his homework done, to be honest.
Yes, that's
Because
great.
for
I love it.
him, this was a tremendous part of his development, and it was something he couldn't do during the school day. They don't have tech ed classes until you're in high school. They sure don't have them at 4th grade. Um, and I realized through watching him and paying attention, he's developing problem solving skills. He's developing persistence because it mattered to him.
Yes.
Asking a child to develop persistence by working on something he doesn't care about at all is going to be an exercise in frustration all around.
Right. And then that's just teaching white knuckling. And most
Yes.
people white knuckle through their life. And then you have these like increasing rates of depression and suicide and
Yes.
other things, right? Because we're
Yes.
not meant to white knuckle through our life. We're meant to feel lit up, and through that lighting up, connect with others, right? And
And
to
think
your
about,
point, I think genuine connection comes from, I know my own light, and I can then share that with you, and you're sharing your light with me.
this is really powerful and actually quite revolutionary, because for not decades, centuries, people have not been telling boys and men, figure out who you are and who you want to be. There has been a pretty strict, this is what you will be if you are a boy. This is what you will be if you are a man. You will be a protector. You will be a provider. You will be a worker. That's your role. And so if we can raise our boys in circumstances and in environments where we encourage them to get to know themselves and to listen to themselves and not just the world and what everybody else is saying they should be, that's revolutionary. I attended recently a health journalism conference because I still do a lot of health writing. And I attended a session about the emotional well-being of kids and what schools are doing to address that. And we talked about social emotional learning. We talked about suicide prevention. I applaud all of those initiatives. The question that I asked was, what, if anything, are schools doing to address the harm that they are causing to children? Because the fact is that school is not an emotionally safe place or fulfilling place for many kids and many boys, especially. And you know the statistics to back this up.
Yeah.
Boys are more likely to be expelled. Boys are more likely to be punished. Boys are more likely to fail. All of this. I wish that we could restructure schools around all of the things that we know are good for kids. I wish that we could restructure our society around the things that we know are good for kids and families. If we start with the basics that we know, right? Free play, time outside, adequate sleep, opportunity to explore and follow your own interests. If we could give kids those things, an adult who cares, that could make such a difference. And yet that's not where we're at yet as a society. So that's what I want to work to. I think in the meantime, it does begin with each of us beginning to look at the boys in our midst. And first of all, recognizing that they are special beings. They are as deserving of our protection, love, and nurturing as anybody else.
Yes.
And work to support that. Come alongside them and help them grow instead of this telling them who they should be.